In this series of live question and answer discussions, we're talking about a process of improving the quality of your life. And these two flowcharts here indicate what we are doing. We're using what's called an iterative process to consistently modify, change, and improve all areas of our life. And the process is similar to that any expert uses. For example, a professional athlete will use a process similar to this to refine and improve the quality of their performance. So we are using a similar process to refine and improve our ability to achieve more happiness, more control, more satisfaction, and more success in each area of our lives. We have been holding these discussions now for over 2 years, and several of the people on these calls are people who have been participating in these live calls for that length of time, over 2 years. And what we're talking about is how the process revealed in this workbook just keeps getting more efficient, more effective, more refined, so that day after day, week after week, month after month, our understanding of our life and our ability to make improvements and changes in our life continues to increase. One of the things that I have experienced, and I'm still experiencing it, is that past events, they can continually change. I have these recordings online, which you guys have, I think, and I put some of them into that Inner Circle goodies folder, which you might have forgotten about, but I have put some more stuff in there, and I sent you a link to it the other day, so you've still got it. Some of those visualization exercises that I have online, like the one about thinking of yourself 30 days in the future and then looking back and what do you want to achieve or what do you want to do in the next 30 days, and then imagine that's 30 days and you're looking back and you can remember, oh, this is what I did to get here. Oftentimes when I listen to those recordings, and pretty well all the recordings, whether it's the morning visualization, the evening visualization, the feeling proud in the rain, whatever it might be, as often as not, I find myself thinking about a completely different thing, something I've never thought about before. Even though the words are the same because they're recorded. I mean, the recording doesn't change, but it's like the experience changes. And Greg has mentioned that a couple times, that his experience of listening, to chapter 10, he was talking about listening to chapter 10 in the audiobook, that it changes. You see more in it, right? You find more little kernels, more little nuggets in there. I had an experience recently where one of my past experiences changed. And this is something I've been thinking about for decades, 50 years maybe more. And just recently it was like, oh, hey, it just changed, which I find astounding. But, of course, it's one of the principles that we talk about from the get-go, which is that iteration, the more you do this work, the more you do the deep work, the inner work, the more it just improves, it gets better, you get more insights, you learn more things, And so if you watch my one-man play, which I know you can't get enough of, If you listen to it, one of the things I talk about in there was um, I had this dream when I was a kid. I went home, told my mother about it. She laughed, and it hurt. I felt criticized, belittled, made fun of, right? And I had not realized the depth of that pain and how much it affected me. And in some ways still affects me. You know, it's a little bit like having acne as a kid. You know, you grow up and you have these little marks on your face or something. You have these little scars, right? So, in a sense, those internal scars, like that internal scar being criticized, that affected me in a huge way. And I say in that play, my mother laughed, and I decided I was never going to talk about this dream to anybody ever again. And the truth is, I didn't talk about it to anybody for more than 50 years. I didn't really talk about it until 2010 when I came back from China and I realized that science now has proven the validity of mental time travel, right? Which is something I discovered in the 80s, which, in a sense, answered my question, where did this dream come from? Right? So that was Yvette just sent me a message. You're the best, Anthony. We're all clapping for you. Okay, thank you. So another thing I talk about in that one-man play is my father saying things to me like, know your place, obey your elders, pay attention to your betters, don't ask questions, do what you're told. You remember that? So that, until very recently, that was about the best that I could come up with to think what that meant. That was him. He was that kind of person. He was in the Navy, you know, and he was just an autocratic, kind of strict disciplinarian. And that was the best I could do to explain where that came from him, and how much I felt it put me in a box that I had to escape from. Because about a week after I finished high school, I left home and didn't go back for like more than 10 years. I just had to get out of there. It was like I felt like I was in a prison. I had to get out of there. And largely it was because of that kind of rigid attitude of my parents, right? And then just about a week ago, the whole thing flipped. And it was like, oh, now I get it. It changed, right? And it changed because I discovered something which I had never thought of before from Gabor Mate. And watching his videos and trying to figure out what he was talking about and why I was so stressed out about this conflict that I was having with my strata council over the two dogs. I talked about that. I was so stressed out. I couldn't sleep. I was angry, frustrated. It was driving me nuts, right? And what I realized was, because Gabor Mate says this is one of his founding principles, I believe, is that when we're young, we will do things to survive. You know, if you're 5 years old and you feel threatened or abandoned or hurt or whatever it might be, you will come up with a way to deal with it. You will adopt a certain position, a certain posture, to survive in that situation because you're trapped in a vice. You cannot lose your connection to your parents. You need them. You can't survive without them. So if you experience something with your parents that causes you some pain or stress or whatever it might be, and he says we've all experienced it. It's stress, right? It's abuse. And he says abuse is not necessarily that they were abusing you, but that you experienced it as abuse. In other words, you experienced it in a painful way. They might have been quite innocent with what they were doing, but you took it as something that was painful, and you adopted a strategy to deal with it. Very understandable, very, intelligent, something to be proud of in a way, right? That you managed to figure this out and you survived because you adopted this mindset. But he says the problem is when that mindset that you developed in response to this threat, this perceived threat, becomes a part of your personality. It becomes an attitude, a belief, maybe a belief system or a strategy for living your life. That's the problem. Because you live your life through this mindset without realizing, hey, I developed this mindset when I was 5 in response to this from my parents, right? This threat that I perceived. So I was thinking about my dad. And I thought, well, what mindset did he adopt as a kid in response to what he was experiencing in his life from his parents and his upbringing? And I suddenly realized that this idea of don't talk back, don't ask questions, obey your betters, pay attention to your elders, do what you're told, which I had always assumed was his sort of philosophy of life. Suddenly now I looked at it as this was his response as a young child to living with his parents. And it was like this huge light bulb went on. And I thought, wow, suddenly the whole thing meant something different and felt different. It was like, gee, I can't beat my parents up anymore for doing that, because that was a strategy that they learned as a child and they just unconsciously took that position with me. And it wasn't necessarily who they were. It was what they had adopted in response to the stress that they had learned or that they were experiencing when they were children. So it was, in a sense, inappropriate, but it was what they learned, right? It was like an accent. I use this analogy a lot. Your accent that you have, which is unconscious when you speak, you have an emotional accent too that you're unconscious of. You just feel a certain way, act a certain way, see the world a certain way without realizing, hey, there's other ways to look at it. So that past that I talked about being so painful in that one-man play, now I look at it completely differently. And I did the one-man play just a couple of years ago, so that's like a big shift that's happened in my view of my upbringing just in the last 2 or 3 years. changed in a way that I wouldn't and couldn't predict. It's like, whoo, thank goodness. So this work that we're doing with the past successes and the beliefs and the attitudes and the mindset and the way we see things, um, it's important. And as we continue to do it, it gets better and better and better. We keep making breakthroughs, which is fantastic.
Wow, that's powerful, Anthony. Man, that's great. I just have to comment, on that. You're talking about one aspect in which, I think of your paint the chair red kind of philosophy a little bit, where you could change the whole perception by your attitude on something, but if you realize you've had this overlay that you've kind of valued everything or made all these decisions in the past based on that, and when you have this aha moment where you can now change it, it changes everything. If you look back at your life and say, "Wow, I was interpreting it all this way, and now I'm interpreting it a different way, and now I have to respond to that change." And all of a sudden, you change in the way you're doing things in the future. You would normally just say, "Okay, parents are always a little controlling, or you might have to leave certain relation, these different kind of parameters." I think that's one. The other thing that I always thought when you say the past can change, that some people might perceive that as incorrect. I think, what are you talking about? The past can't change. I mean, you can't go back and change the events of the day. But at the same time, it's kind of like a movie. When you watch it a second time or a third time, all of a sudden you notice things in the movie that you had no, because now you know the outcome. You're like, okay, this guy, that's the villain. He was not saying he was, their best friend. He was saying the best friend you'll ever have, kind of thing. Like it's you're going to meet your demise or something. And, you can reinterpret it that. And I think our life is like that too. Sometimes we go back and we notice new things when you re-listen to the same topic, but when you replay it in your mind, you say, "Wait a minute, wait, maybe that didn't mean this. Maybe that didn't mean that." Or another way is, like you say, if you say, "Feel the thinking," or "How does your knee feel? How does your left knee feel?" All of a sudden, your focus changed. When you said go back to that past event, I noticed I had friends with me that I was very friendly with, and they were helping me achieve my goal. And so that past success was really not just about achieving the goal, but it was about my friendships. Say, "Hey, I realize that I tend to have a pattern where I succeed with friends." Okay, oh, that's a new aspect of me. Succeeding with friends. I hadn't looked at that past success that way. But all of a sudden I notice a different nuance and say, "Wait a minute, maybe this is a theme here." And I start deductively saying, maybe I should always include friends when I take on a project, because I seem to do better with friends than I do alone trying to do it all myself. And so I think you can notice different things different ways as we retread this old ground, the path we've already been on. But
Right.
with it, we're kind of looking around and seeing the trees this time instead of just looking at the path.
Yeah.
And I think we can do that with our history too. So it's an interesting exercise. Um, and I was thinking, I'm going to do this. When I try to attack a goal, I'm going to remember this feeling. Like when he stepped in the body, you remember the feeling is another aspect of that. When I was back 30,000 feet, I don't feel the feeling. When I go into the body, I feel the feeling of how proud I was and I did that, or how excited I was to start that new project. And that's something you can tap into, that feeling, by just having that in my pocket. I have that success over here and pull it out. So I mean, those are a couple of observations I make about what you're saying. And it's interesting because I would not have thought of these thoughts at all today unless you brought this topic up. That's what's so, it's like an adventure when we go into these meetings. Like, where are we going to go next? Um,
Yeah, and I love the
then I,
way you say overlay, overlaid something. It's kind of like you might have had this experience where you're outside and everything looks kind of different, and then you realize, oh, I got my sunglasses on. You take your sunglasses off and the colors all change, right? It was kind of like that. I overlaid something on this experience, which now I sort of removed it and it was like, oh, hey, wow, it means something totally different now.
yeah.
Thanks.
And the ability to do this is like a superpower. I really joke around it, but I keep thinking mind, time, and power. Like, why am I here? I'm here because I want more power.
It
I
is a
want more power to
superpower.
affect my life.
Yeah, it is
And
a
it's like,
superpower.
you know,
Most people have no clue that it's even possible to do this. Anybody else have a comment? Jess?
So Greg, you and Anthony both refer to NLP quite a bit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the presuppositions of NLP. So one of them, which is like these 16 beliefs. So one of them is, and I highly recommend looking them up. They're very powerful, life-changing. But one of them is every behavior has a positive intention. And that's kind of what Anthony's trying to had explained. And this is, I instantly go to my own training and I relate it. And so it's the same idea, is that survival technique that you created for yourself when you were a child is now a pattern for you, and it's how we interact with the world. So let's say Anthony and I all of a sudden get into a little bit of a tiff. It's not even going to be about the other person, right? Like I probably said something to Anthony that triggered something to send him into his fight flight response from when he was 5, and he doesn't know it because it's happening unconscious. Right, let's go, buddy. But like, and it's not even about him, it's about you all of a sudden having a feeling and having to just react in a way that you had to use that power that you had when you were 5 because it's all you had, right? And so what that does is it allows me to not take things personally, right? Like when somebody jumps down my throat about something or disagrees with me and wants to like make their point over and over and over, like that kind of thing. It's not even about me. It's about them having to feel like they need to survive and make themselves feel better in that moment. So this has been a way of life for me. Like this is for like the last 6 years since I did my NLP training. And it's it's like it takes all the pressure off when you can just remind yourself in that moment. Like Greg, like say you're on a business call and the guy says no to you. It's not even about you. It's not about you at all. And if you can, distance yourself from that, it makes it so much easier to just carry on next. Okay, someone's going to get it, but that guy didn't, and it's not even about me, right? It's always helped me. So I'm glad that you brought this up today, because it's nice to have, like you say, these reminders every once in a while. It's just nice to be like, yeah, right, okay, I got to continue to remember that, right? So
Right.
Yeah, we don't
That's
realize,
great. I'll look that up.
we learn these things, these principles, these rules, these laws, whatever,
yeah.
and we think, okay, I understand that. And then, but we don't realize, as you just pointed out, Jess, hey, it's way more than that, it's way more important. This is why somebody said, hey, there's 16 of these, and wrote it down. And I find this when I'm writing too, like I'm struggling sometimes to find what's the right word, what's the right adjective to use in this situation. You want to convey the right idea. Fully aware, that people are going to misinterpret or at least miss your point, lots of times. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, like, thanks for sharing, Anthony. I think that's really empowering. Like, I don't think this is funny that you played your one-man play as an amateur actor. That's anything to be laughable at. I think I admire your confidence. Um, yeah, when I was just discovering that play, I recommended, I was browsing on this Chinese social media, which is a lot of great information. So it's only accessible for like Chinese people in China. And I saw this person in London, and then he said his advisor, well, he's probably attending a really famous acting school or something. The teacher that he's following there told him that he interviewed Andrew Scott, which is the man in Vanya, like about 5 years ago, for an audition and for something, and he said his advisor didn't take him during that audition, and so the Chinese person was asking his teacher, why didn't you take his so famous? I mean, he's doing so well right now, and his advisor said he was really shy at the audition, so I was not impressed. But I look at just how much he's doing now, and I think he looks like he does not come off as a shy person at all, at least not on the screen. So it's just I think we all have very different like I think different people have very different interpretations of different I don't know how to explain it, but I don't think you should take any advice too personally. I think it's hard, but I would have to practice just not taking that as a personal um invalidation. But I also understand, like in human nature, we tend to seek a validation all the time from others. But I think the less we can do it, the happier we can feel.
Yeah.
And always progress. If I were Angela, if I heard that they think I'm so shy to get the job, I think that's a big attack. Like if as an actor, I think that's a very bad criticism. What do you think? I
Well, a
mean,
lot of actors and performers generally, um, they're very shy. They're very introverted. And lots of times they're very afraid. I mean, Michael Caine talks about throwing up. He used to throw up every time he went on stage for a while, when he was first getting into acting, right? And when you listen to his autobiography, he tells us several stories about, throwing up, right? Because he was just terrified. But for him, I don't know how he got through it, except that maybe he had no choice. He had to break free of his background, which was basically, poverty and sickness, right? So, anything, Naomi? Any ideas?
Nope, I don't have none to add.
I remember when I was one of my favorite shows when I was growing up was Rawhide. Clint Eastwood, right? Rowdy Yates. You've seen that show?
Yeah.
You're dating yourself a little bit. I can barely remember that. I think I've seen
Oh,
it,
is that right?
but
You've never seen it? Oh, wow. Okay.
I think Rawhide's before me, wasn't it?
Yeah, could be. Could be. Anyway, I used to love it. I mean, I'm not sure when it was on TV, but I would, I can look it up. But at any rate, I remember because I liked that character, so much. Um, let's see. Um, the first episode was January 1959. So in 1959, I'd have been 12, right? So
Yeah, so I don't think I even saw a rerun of that.
yeah,
I
so
was,
maybe before your time.
you know.
Anyway, it was a great show. I have a couple of little anecdotes which I'll mention about it. But anyway, so I really liked Clint Eastwood and the character that he played on that show. Right? He was the star, I think, or one of the big stars of the show. And of course, after that, he did those spaghetti westerns in Spain, right? With Sergio Leone. A fistful of dollars for
Oh yeah,
a few dollars more, and then The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. Have you seen those?
Hmm.
yeah. I could whistle the tune for that. Dude.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, they're great shows, and they were remakes, by the way, of Japanese movies, Japanese
Oh
samurai
really?
movies. But
Okay.
at any rate, yeah, they were just taken right from the, Sergio Leone took basically the story and everything from uh, the movies starring Toshiro Mifune, the three. There was a trilogy of the samurai movies made in the early 50s, right? And they're exactly the same. I mean, if you watch the movies, you'll see that they're exactly the same. The same story, except in one, the guy's a cowboy, and in the other one, he's a samurai. But at any rate, I remember when I was reading about Clint Eastwood in some fan magazine because I really liked him. He was one of my favorite actors. Still is, actually. And I was reading this story, and he mentioned that his ambition was to become a director. And I remember reading that, and I got so sad. I felt so terrible. Because I remember thinking, doesn't he know? If you're an actor, you can't be a director. They're totally different. If people allow you to be an actor, you can't be a director. Directors are different. Doesn't he know? he's going to be so disappointed, when he tries to break into being a director and they tell him no. And I felt so sad for Clint Eastwood. Well, I've thought about that over the years, and I thought, where did that idea come from? Like, where did I get this idea, which obviously was very deeply ingrained in me, that there was something outside of me that determined what my position in life was? And I couldn't break away from it. And I think it came from the way I experienced my religion, because the idea that there's something outside of me, i.e., God, that determines how my life is going to go, that's something that I learned that I never questioned. I just thought that's how it is. That whatever happens in your life, it's up to something outside of you, right? And so that idea that you can't be a director, and when he started making movies, Every Which Way But Loose and Dirty Harry and all those things, it took me a number of years before I realized, hey, of course you can be an actor and a director. And for many years when I was growing up, and I guess this was in my teens, I assume, but it probably carried over into my 20s, whenever I heard about an actor who had written a book, it blew my mind. I thought, wait a second, this guy's an actor. What's he doing writing a book? Doesn't he, they're two different things. How can this be? Well, that seems ludicrous now. It seems childish. But of course, I developed that idea as a child, right? The idea that if you're doing this, you can't do that. So, yeah, well, thanks for all that. For more information about this online community, to get your own copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, either the ebook, the paperback, or the audiobook, go to mindtimeandpower.com, where you can also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook.